Kyle, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me on, Sam. Very much appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So, I wanted to start off. So, clarity consultant, I wanted to ask, what does clarity mean to you?
Oh, that's a cool one. You're the first person to ask that. What clarity means to me, clarity is the s- state of being where you have a flow going on. Clarity is when there is no ambiguity, there's decisiveness, there's certainty. Yeah, that's
Mm,
what clarity means to me.
okay. And what is the role of a clarity consultant then?
To overall get folks thinking about their thinking and to be able to get unstuck, celebrate the wins and progress, and be able to create targets and goals and accomplish them in less time. And then to be able to explore the self. So it's just an aspect of just removing adopted stories, either consciously or unconsciously, and figuring out who our authentic self is. And I define authenticity as saying, being, and doing in private as you do in public.
Mm,
Just being the same person in any context. I think that's pretty simple. And so there we can be on that. That's what the whole idea is to pull that out of a person.
yeah, I think that idea of being who you are all of the time, I think it's probably something that's become more common nowadays with like social media and stuff like that. Is being one person there, and like people always say, that's like a highlight reel. So sort of seeing and being the same all the time, being open. Um, Before we get into the sort of takeaways, because I'm quite excited to learn some things that people can start implementing. But I want to learn a bit more about you. So can you give us a bit of an overview of your journey through this and what led you to start this journey of empowering others?
Uh, there a couple parts on that one because I believe that understand where we are now is simply mathematics. It's looking at everything behind us and then we're seeing how things add up, and it makes sense how things add up. So I would say that a couple really key points or catalyzing moments or catalyzing decisions would be when I first pivoted from being a pursuing to be a chef to becoming a personal trainer, and
Okay.
that's to follow an intuitive pull towards helping people, which has been consistent across the board. And then uh, when I got better with personal training, then I integrated nutrition. That way, I can just get better progress for folks. And
Mm,
then from there, I wanted to go to the source of what was preventing people's progress, and that's our words, stories, and breath. And that's how I worked with an overall progression. And it wasn't until 2016, and I consider my life to be pre 2016 or post 2016, or pre
okay.
World's Toughest Mudder, post World's Toughest Mudder. And that was a very big catalyzing event where, uh, in retrospect, I was able to break down the body to build up the mind. I had a huge amount of intensity built up with me when it's just emotional, just from accumulation and just holding on, not really a way to process those emotions effectively and efficiently. And so at that point, I did a 24-hour race with multiple military obstacles. And uh, yeah, I got probably about 90 minutes of naps accumulated within that 24 hours. And what I
Wow.
learned is that I broke down the body to build up the mind. I was able to give myself an opportunity to think by being able to process the emotions. I decluttered the
Mm,
mind in order to make room to throw the party.
yeah. Why do you think it's important for people to, well, do you think it's important for people to do that sort of thing? Maybe not to that level. 24 hours is a big jump, but putting themselves in uncomfortable positions in order to do that.
Uh, I think that it definitely contributes because it's not in an easy life that we figure out who we are.
Mm,
And I believe that to whatever degree it could be, and it doesn't have to be a 24-hour race, right? Like someone going for a block or a walk around the block is what's going to could if that's challenging enough, then that'll do the thing. So what I do think, so from developing a character, like who you want to be or who you are, and unveiling that, when we're going into that pain and when we're testing that threshold, then we're just refining ourselves. We're giving ourselves information, an undeniable stack of proof that we are who we say we are, and we stick to the promises that we made ourselves. So that is one aspect where we can develop respect and love and compassion and care for ourselves, and then that flows outwards outside of us. And then on the other side, where it's actually like a physiological, not just a way to feel awesome about ourselves, when it's a physiological change, when we're looking at neurobiology, there's a part of our brain called the anterior mid-cingulate, which now is believed to be the area of the brain behind the frontal lobe that is responsible for not only our willpower, but it may possibly be simply the seat of our will to live, period.
Okay.
And so the way that we train that part of our brain, similar to how we go to a gym, we want to build our biceps, we're going to lift weights. We want to crank out, if we want to move things, we got to stimulate things. If things are not stimulated, then there's not going to be any growth. And so with this particular area of the brain, it's doing the things that you absolutely don't want to do that develops that part of the brain. And so we get a huge benefit and a huge gain and a huge boost by doing the things that challenge us. And it's just simply how far out of our comfort zone and into our capacity zone do we want to go? Because it's not an issue of can we do it? It's just an issue of do I want to do it and get out of my comfort zone and actually evolve and become better? Or even if there's a situation where it doesn't work out, how can I become better from a situation that doesn't work out? So it develops that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's definitely something that I resonate with is being out your comfort zone. And I've spoken about it quite a lot in previous episodes. I did an episode deep diving into a triathlon trilogy that I've done this year, and
Cool.
definitely deeply out of my comfort zone at times there. But that feeling after, and it's now something that you can look back on, that like building that evidence base of something that when you are in those tougher times, you can look back and think, well, actually, I did this. I remember this feeling from before, etc., etc. You also spoke. You also spoke at the start there about helping people and that sort of drive that led you to pick up personal training in the first place. What draws you to that of helping people? What do you get out of that?
Well, one thing that immediately popped to mind is that if I were to look at love languages, I would say acts of service would be a big one for myself. I like to do things, and that feels good. Yeah. And so there's that part. I also think that a part of it is my mom was really into Tony Robbins when I was in my like youth.
Okay.
So there's that aspect as well. And so I saw what he did for other people, and I really am drawn to that. Uh, and man, honestly, I just feel like a teacher. That's that's pretty much what I feel like a teacher, and what I'm doing now, I feel I'm doing to be in alignment with my intuition rather than forcing me to pursue something that I I'm unsure of. Like it's something different that I'm pursuing rather than I'm just flowing with it. And what I found with that is because it's intuition, where it's our gut feeling. And the way I break things down is that we have our conscious being, we have our psychological being, we have our animal being, our subconscious, and then we have our intuitive being, our uni being, the universal consciousness, you can say, which is also an indicator of how many psilocybin trips I've had. And so when we actually listen or we feel into it, we know when we go into a room, whether it's a good vibe or a negative vibe. We can use the same where we can use our intuition to course correct us if we're off. And I do believe that the worse we feel about ourselves, the further off track we are.
Yeah, I like that. I like that concept. And yeah, the reason I asked was I probably noticed quite recently that without thinking it, I've been doing the same thing in all the decisions that I've made. I was a personal trainer like yourself for that same reason. I became a firefighter for that same reason. Now looking back on it, I suppose, and also picking up volunteering with the Samaritans, which is a helpline for mental health as well. So yeah, I just wanted to see what your opinion on that was,
Cool.
on a little tangent.
That's cool, man.
But getting back onto sort of what you do then. So people come to you who might be stressed, depressed, anxious. Why do you think people, well, are people more stressed than they have ever been?
Oh man. Oh, this is a cool one. Okay, I got a couple cool parts on this one, or neat parts. So I would say, so the folks, so what you listed for folks that come to me, that is accurate, and uh, it's when folks have figured everything out and they have no clue where to go next.
Right.
So even if someone's already at the point where they got what they want, there's still it's just new problems. It's just preferred problems. And so I think it's all the way through. So if it's a problem, then there's an opportunity to solve it. When it comes to stress, oh man. So some cards on this one. Okay. I think that we have a an evolutionary environmental disconnect
Okay.
where modern day, this is my opinion, of course, I would say to our knowledge, modern day, with all the things that we have right now, where we're able to have a conversation across the planet, like that's pretty freaking, that's spiffy. We take
Yeah.
this back to the 1300s, people would be like, that's crazy shit. What the hell are you even doing? I don't even know if that person's on the other side. So we've normalized magic. We've normalized
Yeah.
magic. And although I understand that there's structure and there's you like there's different things doing different things within the desktop and the phone to be able to do the thing, outside of that, I have no clue the inner workings. I just know it works. So I believe that environmentally, we are in a less stressful environment overall.
Mm.
We have we don't have a whole bunch of Jack the Rippers running around as often as we could have had back then because we have so much more surveillance, so much more threat to poor behavior. So overall, I think we actually have a really, really solid existence. So our environment is supports our growth.
Mm.
And we're in an evolutionary mismatch because we are scarcity brained, we are scarcity minded. We have a we have a pull towards accumulating resources because more resources equals more survival. We don't need more resources to survive when our air, water, shelter, food, all of that is we can get food from other places on the planet that we never could have before. I was listening to a podcast and it was with Alexander the Great, and it was near the end where he has already done a, a ridiculous amount of conquering,
Mm.
and he wanted to continue conquering. And a reason that some folks have came up with and that he's mentioned before in his writings was he likes to go conquering because he gets to try all the food that no one else ever could. He had to go conquer civilizations to get the same variety of food that we just go to the vegetable and fruits aisle.
Mm.
So, with that, I believe that our stress is a psychological conceptual stress. And when we don't impose our own order, we veer towards psychic entropy, we veer towards chaos.
Right.
And because we don't actually have to participate as heavily in the day to day aspects of hunting, gathering, accumulating, making sure we're picking foods or making sure that are not poisonous, making sure we're hunting animals rather than being hunted, all of these stressors are removed. So we have no physiological stressors or little or less. It's up here, it's up in the brain. So it comes with even being in a stressful environment, it may only perceive to be stressful by you. So you're the only one that's stressed. That is an indicator or suggests to me that it's nothing to do with the environment, it's everything to do with the person's thinking about their thinking. And so if we're scarcity minded, then what we're doing is shifting it so we understand that our resources have been taken care of. Then we zoom up to the top part. Where is my life in disarray, in disorder, in dis-ease? And then do
Mm.
the opposite. Create ease, create order. And so we just pivot to these other parts so that we become the captain of the ship rather than the side effect. And so when we think about our thinking, and this ties in with what I do as well, is when we think about our thinking, we become autonomous decision makers. We become data driven decision makers. We start to create our own stories rather than adopt other people's stories that they are fearful of, but we may not have to worry about it. So we can remove distractions, we can declutter negative narratives, or we can translate them from harmful to helpful stories to be able to create space for us to enjoy the abundance that we have in the environment rather than thinking ourselves into being miserable. Because if we can be
Mm.
miserable for no reason, we can be happy for no reason.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's sort of the idea of taking control of the way you think about things. And I've spoken a lot about that with other people as well, and the idea of like reframing things, which I imagine sort of comes into your work as well. Um, so taking a turn into sort of exactly what you do then. So we spoke about story work and breath work. Can you give us a bit of an understanding about those and what they entail?
Totally. The way I describe it, breathwork is an umbrella term for a variety of different modalities, styles, or tools of breath. You can upregulate or downregulate your body just simply through the breath. The lungs are the only part of the autonomic nervous system that we can consciously influence. I can't sit here and think, okay, hold on 2 seconds. Okay, yeah, my heart just stopped beating for 2 seconds. I crushed it. That's not a part of it. So the breath is the language of the body.
Yeah.
That's the way I like to break it down. And with breath work, uh, it's a tool or it's a practice where we go from being a thermometer, where we're reacting to the internal external stimuli, and we move to a thermostat where we are controlling our internal temperature to our liking. We find our own personal Goldilocks zone and keep it there. And so breath work is the way to be able to flow it. And then how I utilize it in my practice, because it's breathwork, storywork integrated,
Mm.
is to utilize the breath to be able to push those unmetabolized emotions, those unmetabolized stories that may be in the heart, you might feel in the gut, wherever it could be. And the breath helps push that and flow it through. And that's to be able to get that flow within our body, within our fields going smoothly. It's less
Mm.
jaggedy, it's not as bunched up. So that's breath work. And then
Okay.
story work is the the thoughts that we have, or this is a cool one. Okay. Story work is the method to which we take experiences, whether they hurt, haunt, taunt, annoy, we create distance from those, and we can take experiences or stories. And when I say story, it's experiences, traumas, moments, dreams. I've done a couple of cool dream ones before. And it could be yeah, any narratives. It could be just simply how we think.
Yeah.
And so the story work aspect is taking words that are lead stories, for example. If we're going to go with an alchemy style reference, we're taking lead stories and turning them to golden stories. We're
Yeah.
decreasing the intensity of the stories that hurt, haunt, taunt, or annoy, and we're increasing the meaning of our celebrations and wins. And then when we get unstuck, when we celebrate those wins, then we can work on targets and goals to get things done faster. And story
Mm.
work just puts all the words, all the thoughts onto paper, onto the desktop.
And together, then you've combined them, as we said at the start, to create. the Neuro Linguistic Somatic Experience,
Yes,
which is
sir.
quite a mouthful to say, but the
Yeah.
NLSE.
Yeah.
So, what are the benefits of bringing those two together?
The benefits would be combining the conceptual and ethereal with the physical.
Right.
And so, with the story work aspect, and it's through the breath that we have that intertwining, where it's an intertwining. Uh, so breath, with the breath, we're getting the physical body, we're getting the lungs, we're getting everything moved in. And depending on the style of breath, we can get our body moving with it as well. And then that way we can get all loosey goosey. And we can also, with the breath work, get high off our own supply of oxygen, and we could down regulate and find ourselves in a really chill, grounded state or a euphoric state. We can feel really good physically through the breath. And so then we go upstream to the brain, to the words and the stories and the breath. So it goes downstream from there. So from a physiological standpoint, we're hitting the brain and then we're going into the nervous system. So we're going for the very like first principles, what impacts everything else with it. And so combining the two, it creates a neutral state to be able to go into stories and then alleviate the emotions of those stories to the best of our ability.
Mm. And for people listening to this, obviously, it sounds really good, and anyone who's tried breathwork has probably felt some of these benefits. But to the people who haven't, how is there any way they can get started if they're listening to this? Could you give them a little routine to just try?
Oh yeah. Okay, I'll go with a real simple one. One of my favorite ones is a it's a parasympathetic breathing and it's a calming one. So this is for the context of if you want to chill out.
Right,
If you're like, I feel like chilling out today. So it would go with the tempo. It would go 2 seconds in, 2 second hold, 4 seconds out. That would be a good
right.
one. So it'd be in, two, hold, two, out, two, three, four. In, two, hold, two, out, two, three, four. And if you do that for 5 minutes, you can honestly do it for probably 2 minutes, but 5 minutes you'll get really good. You'll
Mm.
feel just a full, just like wash away. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that nose breathing, mouth breathing? Does it matter?
Personal preference. If you want to have better quality air, breathe through the nose in and then exhale out through the mouth.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the concept of the NLSE. How is that going? Like, how are people responding to this thing that you're bringing to them?
Really well.
Yeah.
Really well. Yeah. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly quick. I knew that folks were going to benefit from it, but because I'm really data driven, because
Right.
I'm collecting as much data as possible. So I get feedback as much as possible on anything. And so this isn't just me thinking of my own personal opinion, it's what's the data has been showing too. And it's been really cool because when we're going into the breath work, people don't experience that very often. So that's a new thing. And it's pretty cool. It's People feel a very big difference. They lose their sense of self. They're actually in the moment. They're not in the past. They're not in the future. They're not thinking about distracting things. They're there. And there's a different feeling to that. And then when it comes to the stories and to the story work aspect, words are the macronutrients of the mind. If we feed our mind quality words, we're going to have quality thoughts. If we feed our mind shit words, we're going to have shit thoughts. And when we're getting people to have higher quality words and higher quality stories, what happens is if there is, okay, I'll put it this way, if there is a trauma that has been lingering and reminiscing in someone's mind for a decade, it's still lingering in the body. So people can go talk about it as much as they want, but it's not going to process it through.
Okay.
The difference between the physical body and the emotional body is the physical body is time bound. We cut our finger, it has to heal itself. And then the emotional body, it's timeless. We have to actively participate in the processing of unmetabolized emotions, or they're just going to
Mm.
stagnate. And we're going to prevent the flow of energy from the emotions, energy, emotion, and it's going to turn into a swamp. Because what happens to a body of water when it stops flowing? It turns into a swamp. And so that's been something that's really cool where folks have been able to combine the emotional and the mental, where it's not just going and having two talking heads. Oh, tell me about that experience for the 15th time about how you were this when you were a kid and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't do anything because there's no out to it. There's an onboarding process, but there's not an outboarding process. And so I provide the outboarding process to actually alleviate the emotions. Bringing the stories up is great. Talking about it is great. If it's a revolving door rather than a evolving door, I don't like that. That doesn't help anybody,
Yeah.
in my
I really
opinion.
like that idea of yeah, bringing the two together, because like you say, when you just talk to someone, that is just a mental emotional thing up here, whereas the rest of your body is not being involved. So it's also like almost like resetting your bodily response to that thing as well as the
Yes.
emotional, right?
Yeah. Because it's a 4 point exposure therapy to it too.
Mm.
And so when we have that exposure therapy, then we decrease the intensity of the feels towards it.
And in the work you do, you use the word empower a lot. So it's about empowering others rather than just giving them the answer. Why is it important to empower people?
I'll challenge myself on that one then. I would actually switch it from it's important to encourage people to empower themselves.
Yep.
That would be more accurate
Okay.
because we can try to encourage another person in whatever capacity. However, if the person is just degrading themselves, they're not going to work towards what they want. And so, yeah, I think encouraging people to empower themselves is a form of empowerment. It's an affirmation that they could be better than they're doing right now.
Yeah. I think getting people to find their own answers is the key, isn't it? I think
Totally.
um, in what I spoke about in doing the Samaritan stuff. So obviously you're listening to people, you're talking to people, but it's different to therapy where there would be suggestions. The whole idea is you are just listening. There are no suggestions. You can't give suggestions. You're just guiding them on this journey of trying to find answers themselves. And when it works, it's really, really, yeah, really rewarding. And those are the changes that are going to stick. I think is
Hmm.
when someone finds the answers themselves. I think if you tell someone what to do, it's very easy for them to go, "Oh yeah, I'll do that," but then not really do it because they haven't got the why.
Totally. I actually have a thought with that point as well. There's a quote that I really like: "Questions pull, statements push."
Yeah,
Yeah. And so
that's really nice.
when we another one that I really like that supercharges this one is that a well-worded question is an answer already half done or found.
Mm,
Something along those
mm,
lines, where we can
yeah.
find the answer in the question. And when we ask questions, it doesn't push the person down, it pulls them up so that they have the opportunity to actually think about their answer, which thinking
Mm,
about our thinking, because then we get to think about, oh, this is actually how I would solve this thing, and then the problem's gone.
yeah.
Or, and another thing as well with problems, because I said problem there, it triggered up another thought. I really like this definition of intelligence where an indicator of an intelligent person is their ability to solve problems.
Right.
The better the problems, or the better the person is at solving problems, the more intelligent they can be.
Mm.
Solve more problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think on top of that as well, another thing that intelligent people do, or some anyway,
Mhm.
is listening and being quiet, not always having to talk. I think a lot of people think intelligence is about talking a lot and
Mm.
saying whatever they think they know. But if you look at a lot of intelligent people, they are just quite silent. They're always listening and learning and using that information to solve problems, like you say. So they sort of link it together.
Mhm.
Um, Talking about the mindset then. So we've spoken a bit about what you're doing with the story work and the breath work, and you gave us an example of the breath work. In terms of the mindset and how we can start to change our mindsets, how we can start to reframe things, what are some things people can start to implement around that?
Ooh. So I'll start with the definition of mindset
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that folks understand that developing their mindset is important. However, it is ambiguous and not practical. And so then we'll have sentences where someone is going, we'll have sentences, I'm really working on my mindset when they're just not. Because then it
Yeah.
would, but, and then you can't say anything because really, what does developing your mindset look like? So technically, it's right. So it's ambiguous. There's no accuracy to it.
Mm.
So definition of mindset is the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves or our opinion of ourselves. That way we can have a higher or lesser opinion of ourselves. It's with the definition, we can actually compare and contrast what we think about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, and then we can say, oh, I have a lesser opinion of myself, which means I have a low mindset. And I
Mm.
truly believe that even if people get upset with the words like loser or winner, I truly believe that when we're looking in the mirror, we know when we're being a winner and we know when we're being a loser.
Mm.
I think that each of us in each of us when we're looking in the mirror and we're totally capable and we know what we can do and we're just looking and we're not doing any of it. It's
Yeah.
like, why are you such a loser, bro? Like, I've said that to myself before in the mirror. Hell yeah. I've also said, why are you such a winner? And the thing is, both answers make sense.
Mm. It's just triggered something in my mind about that whole calling yourself something, so labeling yourself as well. So I'm reading a book at the minute called Awareness. I don't know if you've read
Mm,
it or know of it. Anthony DeMello.
okay.
Um, it's it's a sort of spiritual book, and there's a lot of talk about labeling things and
Mm-hmm.
labeling yourself. And it just triggered when you said about looking at yourself and thinking winner or loser. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the quote you used was perfect. It was being a winner or being a loser. And the importance is in that moment. I think people could easily say, I am a loser, and that label is on them. It's really hard to let go if you start clinging to these labels,
Mm-hmm.
which he talks about in the book. It's really hard then to let go and change that perspective of yourself.
Yeah.
Um, so it's also just being aware to say, okay, in this moment, I might be acting like a loser or being a loser, whatever, but that doesn't define me. I can definitely
Correct.
change. And just because I'm a winner at the moment doesn't mean that that could change. I could have a bad turn in life. So, yeah, it's a really nice sort of idea that just sort of built on exactly what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I like that. I'm gonna check out that book. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a pretty short book, and it's written quite interestingly. Written in a very I don't know how to describe it, but if you read it, you'll understand it. But
Sweet.
it really does make you think. It's all about waking up and just taking a step back from yourself.
Mm.
So yeah, so people changing their mindset is obviously getting that. Is it almost about balancing what's fact and what your thought of it, how that levels to the facts?
Yes.
Would that be?
Yeah, that's a very accurate one. That was
Yeah.
really cool, actually. Right when you started saying, it, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's got it. Uh, yeah, it's a combination of the two because when it's so like how I said earlier, it's a science. It's a science and it's mathematics to understand how we got to this point,
Mm.
and it's a magic to be able to create the point that we're going to. So life itself has that combination of, there's the physical reality that we have experienced, and then there is the mystical and the magical that we have not, but we can create.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, and so it's certainly a combination of the two, where it's challenging and rebuttaling our self narrative. Because I would actually say that it's not self talk, it's self conversation. And people don't have the conversation with themselves, they just talk. And when this happens and our thoughts are just going wild, or there's no training behind it, where we are not directing our own thoughts, we just assume that all the thoughts that come up are 100% accurate and real, and that's not true. That's not true. It may be a feeling, it may be a thought, and then we can rebuttal each to see if it's actually truly accurate. And so I think that it's similar when I'm doing goals with folks. There's the gap and the gain. There's the gap between where we are now and where we want to be, and then there's the gain to which we're trying to accumulate over time. And this great book, it was by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and uh, when we actually accumulate and we collect that physical aspect, like what we're doing, that's evidence stacking towards saying who we are, say we are. So it's lined up.
Yeah.
And then that gain, or the gap between, that's the struggle spot, because we're just trying to close that gap in between where we are and where we want to be. And so I think that there is certainly that realism between understanding what we have at our disposal as an individual and a character, as an avatar of this video game, for
Mm.
example, and then also coming up with the creation and the imagination as to what we could accomplish and what we can accomplish if we are to have the desire to do so. Because if you don't have a desire to do so, then it's not going to happen, or it's unlikely to happen. Or if someone says, I should go to the gym, I should do this, I should do that. If you want to know what folks are unlikely to do, listen to whatever comes after the word should.
Yeah. And so, in terms of that, just going back to the self talk versus self conversation, that was a really nice way to put it. So, just to clarify, self talk would be maybe what that inner voice is telling you. We all have it, and sometimes it's really harsh to us. The self conversation is then it becomes two ways. You have a chance to say back, well, actually, no, that's not fair,
Correct.
whatever.
And it could actually extend not just to two ways, but to three ways. Because the way that I break that down, because I have a character construction framework. So there is the primary voice, which is the one that we're speaking to. Like, I'm speaking to you, Sam, Sam's speaking to me,
Yeah.
and we're the end decision makers. So no matter what the voices are that's going on, this is the primary decision maker and is the one responsible for directing the boat, which is our body
Yeah.
and our decisions. And so within us, similar to the angel devil style, we have an inner rival and an inner role model. And both of these characters show up every morning to a mental courthouse where the primary voice is the judge. The
Mm.
inner rival comes up, says, this is an undeniable stack of proof that Sam is not who he says he is. In fact, he's more like this. Then, on the other hand, you have the prosecutor, then you have the defendant on the other side, where you have your inner role model, the person that you aspire to be, the person that you
Mm.
want to become, that you want to develop into. Because what we get is a side effect of who we become. It's not
Yeah.
anything else. We have to become the person to get the thing, because if we stay the person we are, we're only going to get what we've ever got. And so the rival's going to show up with an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are, in the form of you're an absolute badass. And there's a cool, and so as the primary, as the judge, because the rival and the role model can't converse with each other. They can only converse through us. So we have two, and then we're listening to two, and then we decide as the primary which one's which. And there's an old story that I really like that has this point too, where there's this kid that asks his grandfather about an inner conflict that he was experiencing. And the grandfather said, between us or within us, there are always there are two wolves, a light wolf and a dark wolf that's fighting for our attention. And the kid asked, which of the wolves win? And the grandfather asked, whichever one you feed first. We feed either the rival or the role model with our decisions. Our decisions are the nutrient density, or not nutrient dense, could be depending on who you're talking or listening to. However, same point, the decisions are what feed either the rival or the role model. And we can choose which one to feed at any point in time. And whoever we feed the most is going to be the person that we become.
Mm. Yeah, I really like the idea, and I liked the analogy of the courthouse as well, and thinking of the two voices then vying for that and putting the evidence forward. Um, how could people start to build up that evidence base then? They might feel like they haven't really got a lot, even though they sort of know what changes they might want to make, but they might not feel like they have that evidence base. What can they do?
Uh, if they don't know if they have the evidence base, it would be looking to see how accurate that is. I would say, like, for someone, like, what evidence do I have that lines up with where I want to go? That way, at least someone could look at the past and find information to support their present day decision.
Mm.
So, for example, someone could say, I used to run all the time when I was in high school, and then I gained weight because I stopped running, and I'm starting to lose weight now, so I'm going to start running. And then they have that baseline. It's like, oh, I could run. I did run back in the day. I can easily do it again. And then it's only a decision to just pick it up and do it. Might be a little bit
Yeah.
more of a struggle bus. However, that's fine.
Mm.
So it would be, I honestly, the easiest one, because now I thought about it a bit more, having the outcome and the target in mind and really having that as specific as possible. So for that one, I like going with a target story plan, or we can also
Right.
put it as a focus frame floor, and where the focus is the target that we're going to, the frame is the story to which we either are working towards it, are doing it now, or have done it looking back.
Right.
So, fun fact, time travel is a little bit a part of this. And so when we get a story that lines up and we write a story that lines up with what someone wants to do, then we get people to, then we can feel and experience those stories in the moment. So we can
Mm.
feel what it feels like to have that. And then it makes it a lot easier for the rest of our body that would be increased resistance. Because it's not that someone can't do something. I believe that it's the resistance that's preventing this progress. I think
Mm.
it comes down to resistance. If it's fear, resistance. If it's rejection, resistance. If it's um, self sabotage or procrastination, or as I like to call it, active participation in preventing progress, that's resistance. So,
Okay. Stepping out and talking a bit about the NLSE that you created, what are your goals with that? Where do you see that going? Like, how do you want to sort of bring that to more people going
mm,
forward?
to more people, well, podcasting, community sessions.
Mm.
My overall goal is to really, I want folks to be able to think about their own thinking, to be able
Mm.
to work towards goals they want, to be to have as little dependency on external factors and resources, and to be able to understand their capacity and their capability to do what they want to get to where they want to go. It's
Mm.
removing that resistance. It's removing that to the best of our ability. And it's a team sport. Like, all of us are working towards it, and it's a way to be able to pursue that abundance and pursue that peace and presence that folks, I believe, are searching for in the wrong direction. They're looking outwards
Right.
rather than inwards.
Mm. Yeah, I like that, and I think the work you're doing is really good. I think it's really important. especially a lot of the stuff we've spoken today. And yeah, best of luck with it all.
Great talking to you.
So coming up to the end of the episode, so what I've started to do at the end of episodes now is ask my guests to leave a question for the listeners to take away. So listeners, listen up. This is a question that you can take away and maybe start a conversation with someone in your life. So family member, friend, stranger, whatever it is. If you give them a question to take away, what would that be?
I think I got a good one. Okay, so what are you saying should to that you can say can to?
Yes. Yes, I like that a lot. I think
You want,
that's
some folks might have an existential crisis. They'll be like, "Oh no, I can't do
you just
it."
ruined half the listeners'
Yeah, yeah.
lives. Yeah.
Oh
No,
shit.
that's a really nice one. I think um definitely something that I can look across my life and probably find a few things, and I'm sure everyone out there
Mhm.
will. And hopefully they've taken a lot away from today. It's been a really interesting episode and really insightful for myself. So yeah, I'm just hoping that everyone found as much value as I did. So if people want to find you online and follow you and keep up to date with what you're doing, where can they do that?
The Instagrams, actually, all my social platforms are Dapper Dude Kyle. It's really easy to find me. DAPPERDUDE Kyle, who is
Nice.
actually that's actually the Dapper Dude Kyle is the name of my inner role model.
Oh, nice.
Mr. Simpleton is the name of my inner rival because self defined. I would say back in the day I was a pansy ass mother, and I just didn't like myself then. Uh,
Mm.
so Dapper Dude Kyle, and then you'll be able to find websites on there too. Yeah, and then I also have my own podcast, Limitless Life, or The Limitless Life with Kyle Smith, and you can check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll link it all down below as well for anyone listening. Um, should we all be naming our role models, our inner role models?
I would say yes, because then it creates solidity and it's not as ambiguous. Because if we don't name it, actually, there's an idea on this one. Really short, really
Bonus
short.
content.
Bonus content. Fucking yeah. So I don't think it was The Conjuring, and I don't think it was Insidious. However, there was the Nun Ghost. It was a scary movie. It came out recently, quotey fingers,
The
and
Nun, yeah.
it
Yeah.
had the nun, and the whole movie, this demon was wrecking house and absolutely slaying. And the key to defeating the demon was for the main character to read the name. What is the name of the demon? Because when we name things, we have power over things.
Mm.
Mhm.
Awesome. Lovely little bit of bonus content to finish off.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Carl. It's been amazing. And I've really enjoyed it.
Likewise.
For anyone listening, if you have enjoyed it as much as I have, please do share the episode with a friend. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening if you haven't already. And if you can rate the show as well, that really helps. You can follow us on Instagram at Lonely Chapter Podcast. And lastly, from me, thank you for listening.